Hey, welcome back to STR Unfiltered, everybody. I'm Bill Faith, your host, founder of Build Short-Term Rental Wealth, the STR Wealth Conference, and 34 other startups. Kind of crazy, I know, but I'm addicted to business. And that's what this is when you get into the short-term rental space. It's a business. That's the first and foremost thing that I want everybody to understand. Where people go wrong is they think this is just buying a house like a primary residence or a vacation rental that is going to be used for their family. And they kind of treat it like that redheaded stepchild. And that's something that I don't want you to do. I want to make sure that you are looking at this like a business. That's the reality of what goes into being a super high level host, right? So I build super properties, I built out a super portfolio, but I've also built a super life along with that. That's because I've treated this like a business since day one. Now, I'll take a step all the way back to the very first property that I purchased on my own. My wife and I bought a beach property in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and we still have a lot of properties down there actually. But we didn't know what we were doing at that time, and we turned it over to the property management company that the real estate agent that we used to purchase the property represented, and it was a clusterfuck from point number one. I mean, they didn't know how to market, they were underpricing, just like all the other legacy PMs that are out there. And what I've learned over the last, God, almost 8.5 years doing this in this industry. But the reality is once I took that over from the PM and started self-managing, then I had to have a completely different perspective. And it wasn't really a business. It was a lifestyle asset, but it was a lifestyle asset that I needed it to pay for itself because I wasn't as wealthy then as I am now. So it had to fund. And that's one thing that I think becomes really important where people make mistakes is they hire a co-host, they hire a property manager, and then the property typically doesn't cash flow. It's very challenging to cash flow any property, a long-term rental, mid-term rental, or short-term rental, when you have a property management company that's taking 15, 20, sometimes 25 or 35%, even 40% in condo hotels, some places, off the gross revenue. I mean, that's like being a 50-50 partner with the PM. So really, I believe, and I just kind of want to set the tone for what I'm about ready to get into of what the reality is that you need to self-manage and you need to treat this like a business. If you can do those two things and then acquire the two most important skills, which are revenue management and off-platform marketing, then you can crush like I do. I mean, I outperform the 90th percentile of AirDNA by 52%. Actually, it's 49% right now. I was looking at it yesterday after I got back from New Orleans. So the reality is to do that and to also have other businesses or a W-2 or time with your family is number one is you have to implement automation. So everything for me has to be managed off of this. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm showing you my phone. If you're on YouTube, you can see what I'm talking about. And if you are listening to this, I would highly recommend that you subscribe to the Build Short-Term Rental Wealth YouTube channel and check out the videos because a lot of times I'm dropping in stuff that you just can't hear. With that being said, automation is critical for me because there's two big things that I hear people complain about all the time on social media: cleaners and messaging and the time that it takes to manage a property. Well, the reality is those people, in my opinion, do not know what they're doing or they haven't taken the time to implement the automation, the technology that they need to be able to eliminate like literally 75, 80% of the workload when you're just trying to use brute force and manually get through it. So I currently own, as of the recording of this podcast, 13 short-term rentals. I co-host 11 short-term rentals. That's a total of 24 properties. These are all in vacation rental markets. They're all in drive-in vacation rental markets. People would probably argue that my properties in Montana, a lot of people fly into them, and I would agree, but still the majority of the traffic is coming from drive-in vacation rental markets. Gulf Shores, Alabama, Smith Lake, Alabama, that's Arley, Alabama, Banner Elk, North Carolina, Whitefish, Montana, Coram, Montana, Cave Creek, Arizona. That's where we're now in the Outer Banks, and Duck and Corolla. That's where the majority of the properties are. So there's 3 in Montana right now. There's 2 in the Outer Banks. There's 2 in Banner Elk, North Carolina. There's 4 down in Gulf Shores. 1 soon to be 2 at Smith Lake. Those are the owned properties. And what happens with this is that the first thing that I do to eliminate the time and the struggle is I implement my technology. Because but look, the reality is that you can't automate everything. The people that say that they have a portfolio my size and they work 2 hours a week are feeding you a line of BS, and they're trying to sell you something in most cases, right? So I can tell you that I was just down in New Orleans for about a day and a half. Took, I think it was 8 or 9 bookings in that day and a half. And that means that I had to take time out. Like I literally got off stage for a lunch and went and I filmed my welcome messages. I filmed 3 of them that are like 30 seconds. So that alone takes like 5 minutes to execute. And I just welcome my guests via video and text it to them to start that relationship. If you factor in setting up the time of all of your automation and everything that you do, or if you want to go down the VA route, I'd rather leverage technology. I'd rather leverage AI chatbots than have to train and continually quality control virtual assistants. And those bots are just getting better and better by the day. So the biggest thing that I try to look at the reality of people that are complaining about how much time it is, how bad their cleaners are. It's because you're not training well enough on the front end. You're not doing a good enough job going through the interview process. Remember, this is just like a regular fucking business. If you're hiring somebody to do your social media, if you're hiring somebody to, be a barista at Starbucks, it's how you hire, it's who you hire, and it's how you train, how you set up the operational component of your business is what's going to dictate the success or failure of the business and how much time and pain you're going to have to put into running this business. I have very little pain. The only time that I typically have pain is when something goes wrong, right? And I had a minor to medium-sized issue I had to deal with a co-hosted property down in Gulf Shores last night, and literally guests checked in at 4:00 and the pool was filled with algae, and that is just not acceptable for them, and it's not acceptable for me. But I literally was just boarding my flight to fly back to Nashville, texted my pool guy. He said, I'll be there in 15 minutes. I was just there on Saturday, so they were checking in on Tuesday. Not that much time had elapsed, but we had a storm, breaker went out, and literally the pool pump went off, and in 2 days it turned green. Well, he was there in 15 minutes. He got it taken care of. I texted the guest, said, hey, I'm jumping on a flight. I can't call you. I normally would. I apologize. It's my fault. We had a storm. Breaker went out. Nobody quality controlled that before you arrived. But we got it taken care of. By this morning, it's clear. It's still murky. So he was there at 7:45 this morning putting in solution to make the water clear. Now, that took me probably a good 15 to 20 minutes to deal with that one solution. But that doesn't happen all the time. That happens like literally with 24 properties, maybe once a week. Sometimes many weeks I go without having any issue. And I'm talking not the pool having algae, but you could have somebody doesn't know how to work the coffee maker, right? Or, we have like in Montana, we have radiant heating and floors in 2 properties, and they may not be able to figure that out because it's a unique type of controlling system, a thermostat. It's not like an Ecobee or a Nest. So those are the things that become really important. Here's how you combat all this stuff. You combat it through process, standard operating procedures. You document it. I make sure that my wife has it. I make sure my cleaners have it. My handyman has it, whatever's applicable to their job to be able to execute it. The other one is really just in those SOPs, as an example, is like setting up reminders. So as an example, in season for like our summer season properties, there's a couple of things that happen. Every turn, our handyman goes in and they do the 48 inches and below, and that's literally going down and painting. So all the luggage scuffs and everything that happen on the walls, but also he or she, because we have female handy women as well, are replacing the air filters every month. So I've set that up with automation to remind them, and I ask them to confirm when it's done. And one of the big things is on the filters is that they have to write the date of replacement in a Sharpie. It's not good enough for them to just replace them. Then they take a picture of it, then they send it. That's really the only micromanagement that I do to make sure that stuff is done to preserve the HVAC and preserve the experience for the clients. But I'm using automation for that, right? And that stuff, I just send out automated text messages through Market My STR to handle that. And then they can reply and I can just manage it right on my phone. So the other thing is setting up the technology. So I said earlier, I set up everything to go straight from my phone. I do not want to jump on this, iMac to have to do anything. There's some things that I do. So I'm choosing my technology that has a good interface on from a mobile standpoint, whether they have an app or they have a web app to be able to utilize. So I think the reality of owning 13 short-term rentals and co-hosting 11, and these are big properties. Like I don't co-host properties that are a 3-2 that do $50,000 a year in revenue. We're talking about, super properties. That's it. I only own super properties. I only co-host super properties. So there's a lot of intention that goes through to architect that model that I want to have as my businesses, right? So, and I do refer to every individual one of my short-term rentals as its own business. It has its own entity. It has its own, chart of accounts in QuickBooks. It has its own credit cards, its own debit cards, its own bank accounts. Everything is completely siloed, right? So I don't factor that in when I say that I've done 34 startups. I look at all of that as one, but from an accounting perspective, from a liability and asset protection perspective, they are individual, and I think of them as individual businesses. The one thing that I don't know what's going to happen in the future, and I'm already not liking it a whole lot, is the entire groups having access to chat, inside of this, especially with larger properties. My average occupancy is 12, might be closer to 13 now. It'll jump up when I add my 32 occupancy or 34 occupancy lake house here in about 3 weeks. I don't want 34 people on there messaging and asking a million questions. So one of the things I'm doing is going in and relegating to the booker that, hey, all communication needs to happen. They can watch and they can see everything. They can download the digital guidebooks, the touch stays, that type of stuff. But the reality is that for me to sustain the reality that I have right now, which isn't bad at all, because I do have a great cleaners. I do have great boots on the ground. And look, in a market like Banner Elk, I went through 3 shitty cleaning crews. And sometimes in those smaller markets, that's just a byproduct of it that you have to go through because you don't have enough resources. But that is one thing that I have learned through my investing career in short-term rentals and being in multiple states and multiple markets, is that I'm going in and I'm actually looking for markets that have the resources. I'm not going into super small markets where I have to have people drive 30 minutes or 45 minutes, because then that's going to make it more challenging for me personally to manage and to deliver a high quality product to my guests. So that's kind of my reality as a short-term rental host. I can tell you that there's always issues, and that it can be time consuming sometimes if you have something major happen. But the other thing I'll tell you is really the technology, like using the new Bestie AI app is amazing. I mean, I use OwnerRez overlaid with messaging. I love the AI of Hospitable, but Bestie's like next level, which will even save me more time. So really the moral of the story here is, folks, the better you are at executing the setup, and I'm not just talking about like staging and designing your property, but putting the right technology into place, creating all those SOPs and making sure that your team is trained well on the front end. That's what makes this business easier. Hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, drop a comment on YouTube down below. I'm always in. I'll get a notification. I'll come back and answer you right away. Make sure you smash that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever, make sure that you hit that subscribe button as well. And it would mean the world to me if you just take 30 seconds, if I've helped you in any way, to leave a review. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of STR Unfiltered.
Thank you for listening to STR Unfiltered, where we give you actionable episodes without the bullshit.